Imagine, just for a moment, that you could isolate the sound of humans striving. You take a microphone, a really, really sensitive one, and you drop it right into the timeline of history, let's say the last 5,000 years. You hit record.
Yeah.
What exactly comes through the headphones?
It's not going to be quiet, that's for sure.
No, it is deafening. You're
Yeah.
going to hear this chaotic mix. You'd get the Gregorian chants, bouncing off cold stone walls in a monastery.
That low hum of devotion.
Exactly. And then you'd hear the heavy, rhythmic tolling of iron church bells in a European square, just marking time.
Right.
Fast forward a bit, and you hear that low-frequency hum of a server room, processing petabytes of data, searching for patterns.
Mining for crypto, maybe.
Yeah.
Training an AI.
Right. And you hear the frantic, precise ticking of a mechanical clock. And underneath all of that noise, just a simple biological heartbeat. Thump, thump. Thump, thump.
That wall of sound, I mean, that is the audio signature of a species that is constantly looking for more.
We are obsessed with the upgrade. It's the universal human condition, right?
Mm.
We want to be better, cleaner, freer, smarter than we were yesterday. And depending on where you drop a pin on the map or which level-bound book you pull off the shelf, we have very different names for this upgrade. Some call it salvation.
Some call it liberation.
Others call it enlightenment.
But historically, and this is important, we usually treat those as three different destinations, on three totally different maps.
Right. You go to one building for salvation, you go to a mountaintop for enlightenment.
They don't usually sit in the same room.
Exactly. But today, we are doing something different. We've pulled a stack of research and source material, specifically excerpts regarding salvation, liberation, and enlightenment, that argues we've been looking at this all wrong.
All wrong.
These sources suggest that these aren't vague, mystical feelings or separate goals. They are actually components of a single source code. A specific operating system for being human.
And this is where we have to, adjust our lenses a bit. We need to put our rationalist hats on.
Okay.
Because the material we're diving into today, which is based on a rigorous, almost mathematical analysis of Quranic concepts, proposes that these aren't three different paths. They're interconnected outputs of a single logical algorithm.
So, welcome to the deep dive. I'm the empiricist. I want to know how things work in the real world, what I can touch and measure.
And I'm the rationalist. I want to understand the internal logic, the architecture of the system.
And today, our mission is to decode the soul's source code. We are going to strip away the mysticism and look at the mechanics. Is spiritual growth magic, or is it a machine?
Well, if we are going to treat this like a system analysis, we have to start by defining our variables. You can't understand the upgrade, this new operating system, if you don't understand the legacy systems currently running on the human hard drive.
Right.
When we looked at the global landscape of faith and philosophy, how do different systems handle the bugs in the human condition?
Okay, let's look at the data. And to be clear, we are generalizing here, for the sake of the model. But let's look at the user error problem. If we look at the classical Christian tradition, broadly speaking, the bug is treated as inherent. It's original sin.
Right. The system is viewed as corrupted from the factory reset.
Yeah, because of an ancestral error.
Right. And the logic follows that if the corruption is inherent, if the hardware itself is, bricked, you can't fix it yourself.
You can't code your way out of a hardware failure.
Exactly. The fix has to come from the outside. So salvation in that model is a gift of grace. You have to accept a patch redemption offered by a savior. It's a download, not a compile. You receive it, you don't build it.
Okay. Then if you pivot to Judaism, the focus shifts pretty significantly. It feels less about a corrupted individual soul and more about a broken world and fractured community.
Yes, the fix is communal. It's about the covenant. You run the program of mitzvah, the commandments, the actions, to maintain the well-being of the people.
So salvation is collective. It's about the network, not just the node.
Exactly. And if we look east to Hinduism or Buddhism, the bug is identified as something else entirely. It's suffering. Or the cycle of rebirth, samsara.
The infinite loop.
The infinite loop of cause and effect. Exactly.
Right.
The goal there is liberation, moksha, or nirvana. You want to break out of the loop.
So it's an exit strategy.
It is. You want to extinguish the ignorance or the desire that keeps you rebooting into this messy existence.
So just to map this out, we have grace, which is like the download. We have community action, which is network maintenance. And we have escape, which is breaking the loop.
A good summary.
But here's the pivot. The source material we are analyzing today argues that the Quranic framework does something totally different.
Yeah.
It rejects the idea that these are separate, distinct goals.
It unifies them. It proposes a universe that is strictly governed by cause and effect, what it calls the law of recompense.
The law of recompense.
In this view, spiritual success isn't a gift you receive, and it isn't an escape hatch you jump through. It is an earned triumph of the sovereign will.
Earned triumph. That phrasing, that really sticks out to me. It sounds athletic. It sounds like work.
It is athletic. It's rigorous. And it starts by rewriting the definition of that very first variable we mentioned, salvation.
Okay, let's unpack this, because in the source text, the first thing that goes out the window is the concept of original sin.
Completely. The text argues that from a Quranic perspective, the human being is not born with a corrupted operating system. There is no original sin.
Wow.
And if there is no original sin, the logic dictates that there is no need for a savior in the traditional sense of a rescuer who, pays your debt for you.
That's a massive deviation from the legacy software most people are familiar with. So if I'm not broken, if I'm not carrying this inherent debt, what am I?
You are a free moral agent. You are fully functional hardware. You arrive with a blank slate and the capacity to choose.
Okay.
So salvation in this context isn't a one-time rescue mission. It's a continuous process. The source breaks it down into a specific equation. Iman plus amali salih.
All right, let's define those terms clearly. We hear them a lot, but what do they mean in this source code context?
Well, Iman is usually translated as faith, but the source argues that's too passive. Faith can just mean, I hope so.
Right.
In this framework, Iman means conviction. Specifically, conviction in the universal laws of cause and effect. It's knowing the rules of the game with absolute certainty.
Okay, so knowing the rules and the other part.
Amal salih. That translates to righteous deeds. But again, righteous can sound a bit vague. Think of it as constructive action or amendment.
So the equation is knowing the rules plus taking constructive action.
Precisely. It's active goodness.
So it's not just believing the right things. I can't just sit in my room, agree with philosophy, stroke my chin, and be saved.
No. Belief without action is just data sitting on a hard drive. It doesn't execute. It produces no output. The source emphasizes that true salvation is the result of living a life of active justice. You have to contribute to the well-being of others. The text references Surah Al-Azhar, which is a very short, very famous chapter, which basically says humanity is in a state of loss unless they are actively enjoining truth and patience.
It's the difference between having a gym membership card in your wallet and actually being on the bench press lifting the weights.
Exactly. The card doesn't make you strong.
The card is just access.
Precisely. The lifting is the salvation. And this leads directly to the second variable, liberation. If salvation is the workout, liberation is what you are training for.
Okay. And in this framework, what exactly are we breaking free from?
Two things, the chains outside and the chains inside.
Okay, chains outside. That sounds political. Is this some kind of revolutionary manifesto?
It is, in a profound way. The source argues that the Quran demands freedom from blind tradition, freedom from the authority of priests or religious institutions.
Or doing things just because our ancestors did them.
Yes, that's a huge one. It's a heavy disruptor. It's basically saying, don't trust the legacy software just because it came pre-installed on your culture.
You have to verify the code yourself.
Correct. It challenges the hierarchy. But the rationalist in me argues that the harder battle is actually the second one, the internal chains, liberation from the nafs.
The nafs. This is usually translated as the soul or self, right?
Yes, but in this specific context, the source defines it as the lower self, the ego, the animalistic drive.
So the voice in your head that wants the donut.
Yes.
Or the promotion at any cost, or the revenge when someone cuts you off in traffic.
That's the one, the selfish drive. The source describes this as the tyranny of the self. And this is a really interesting psychological pivot. We usually think freedom means doing whatever I want.
Right.
But this source asks, if what you want is dictated by your hormones or your anger or your greed, are you actually free?
I see. If I can't say no to the donut, I'm not free. I'm a slave to the sugar craving.
Exactly. You're just running a script dictated by your biology.
Yeah.
True liberation is breaking the servitude to your own appetites. It's possessing the executive function to override the base programming.
I can almost hear the chains snapping. It's a powerful image freedom, not just from the dictator out there, but the dictator in here. But then we get to the third variable, which is usually the vaguest one of all. Enlightenment.
Right.
Usually when I hear enlightenment, I picture someone sitting under a Bodhi tree, eyes closed, maybe glowing a little bit.
Levitate a few inches?
Yeah, levitating. It feels very abstract.
And this is where the rationalist perspective in this source material really shines. It argues that light nur in the Quran isn't a mystical trance. It's not a mood. It is intellectual clarity.
Intellectual clarity. That sounds almost secular.
It's a state of high-functioning reason. The source connects this to the idea that the universe operates on laws, the sunnahs of Allah, or you could say the laws of nature.
Okay.
Enlightenment is simply the ability to see those laws clearly, to discern truth hack from falsehood batil.
So it's not about closing your eyes and transcending reason. It's about opening your eyes and using reason to navigate.
Exactly. The source quotes Surah Muhammad. Will they not reflect upon the Quran, or are there locks upon their hearts? The light is the result of reflection. It's active reasoning. It's the difference between stumbling through a dark room and turning on the light so you can see where the furniture is.
So if we sum up this first section, this integrated circuit, as you called it, salvation is the work you do.
Yes.
Liberation is the freedom you gain from the ego and blind tradition. And enlightenment is the clarity of mind that guides the whole process.
A single integrated circuit. You can't have one without the others. You can't be enlightened if you're a slave to your ego, so there's no liberation. And you can't be saved if you aren't doing the work, so no salvation.
Okay, that's the theory. That's the architecture document. But I'm the empiricist. I want to see how this runs in the real world. I want to run the experiment. How does this code actually compile in a human life on a Tuesday morning?
Well, the source provides us with a specific mechanism, a daily protocol. It's called salat.
Right. Now, usually this is translated as prayer.
And the source argues that is a terrible translation. It's almost misleading.
Okay, why?
Because prayer implies asking for things, a wish list. Dear God, please give me a new car. Please let me pass this exam. That is dua supplication. Salat, according to this analysis, is something else entirely. It is a 247 existential discipline.
Whoa, 247? I thought it was 5 times a day.
The ritual is 5 times a day. But think of the ritual as a rehearsal, or maybe a daily briefing. The source calls the physical act a geometry of submission.
I love that phrase, geometry of submission. Let's visualize this for the listener, because these movements, standing, bowing, prostrating, they are iconic. We've seen them on the news and movies. But what are they actually coding for?
Okay, so imagine the movements. You start with the standing qiyam.
Standing tall, hands folded or at the sides.
The source interprets this as the moment of ethical choice. You are upright, alert. You are essentially standing at attention before the universal law. You are resolving to follow the moral code. It's a position of readiness.
Then you have the bowing ruku.
Bending at the waist, hands on knees. This is physical humility. You are lowering the ego. You are physically demonstrating that you accept an external authority higher than yourself. You are acknowledging with your body that you are not the center of the universe.
And then the prostration sujud.
Head on the ground. The highest part of your anatomy, the brain, the seat of the ego placed on the lowest surface, the dust.
The ultimate reset button.
It's a total rejection of self-sovereignty. You are aligning your limited human will with the universal divine will. It's a declaration of zero resistance to the truth.
So it's physical, but it's really a psychological recalibration tool. It's body language affecting the mind.
Exactly. It's a drill. But here is the key question the source asks, which I think is fascinating. Why do you do the drill? What is the output?
Well, the standard answer people give is to please God.
The source takes it a step further, uses a fascinating analogy. It says salat is an ethical inoculation.
Like a vaccine.
Yes. The source cites the verse. Indeed, salat prohibits immorality and wrongdoing. Note the word prohibits. It's an active barrier.
So the claim is that if you run this program correctly, it blocks the virus of corruption.
Specifically, it blocks 2 strains of the virus. Fasha, which represents private vice, the stuff you do when no one is looking, the hidden shame.
Right.
And munkar, societal injustice, the stuff that hurts the community, the public wrong.
But hold on. We know people who pray, who do the movements perfectly, but who are still corrupt. They lie, they cheat. So is the vaccine defective?
No, the source argues the application was defective. If the inoculation doesn't take, it's because the person didn't actually run the code. They just mimicked the motions.
Huh.
The source is very strict on this. If a person performs a ritual, perfect posture, perfect Arabic, but then goes out and commits fraud,
the system crashed.
The input was invalid. The ritual was empty motion. The metric of success isn't how holy you felt during the prayer. The metric is your behavior after the prayer. It's a functional system. If the output justice isn't there, the code wasn't running.
That is a remarkably high bar. It turns religion from a hobby or an identity into a daily A daily performance review.
It demands consistency. You can't be holy in the mosque and corrupt in the market. The system rejects that duality. It's an integrated circuit, remember.
Okay, so Salat is the operating rhythm. It keeps the system aligned. But every system needs a filter. We are bombarded with noise, with bad data, with temptations, with distractions. How do we process all that?
This brings us to the next protocol in the stack, Psalm, usually translated as fasting.
Right, which most people know as don't eat or drink from dawn to sunset. It's usually framed as a test of willpower or empathy for the poor.
True, and those are aspects of it. But the rationalist asks, why? Is the creator of the universe really interested in your hunger pangs?
Right. I've always wondered about that.
The source argues, no. Psalm is not primarily about physical hunger. It is an exercise in moral intelligence.
Moral intelligence. Okay, break that down. How does skipping lunch make me morally intelligent?
Think about the metaphor of eating and drinking in the Quran. The text often speaks of truth as sustenance. It talks about manna, or a table spread sent down from heaven.
So food as knowledge.
Exactly. Eating symbolizes consuming knowledge, guidance.
So by flipping that.
Exactly. If eating good food represents consuming truth, then abstaining from food is a training exercise. It teaches you to abstain from the wrong food.
And what is the wrong food for the soul?
Batil, falsehood, superstition,
Right.
self-serving doctrines, slander, gossip.
So it's data filter.
It's a high-bandwidth firewall for the mind. The physical fast is just the user interface. The back-end process is blocking ethical damage. The source lists things like blocking unjust gain economic exploitation, blocking malicious speech, blocking harmful intentions.
I see. So if I'm just starving myself, but I'm still lying to my clients or gossiping about my neighbor or cheating on my taxes.
Then you aren't running the program. You're just hungry. You're dieting, not fasting. The source is explicit. The purpose of Psalm is taqwa, moral consciousness. If you don't get the moral consciousness, you miss the entire point.
It's interesting how both of these examples, prayer and fasting, take something physical and turn it into something intellectual and ethical. It's like the physical act is just a trigger to remind the mind to do the work.
That is the core thesis here. The body is the vehicle, but the driver is the intellect. And that leads us to the biggest problem the source identifies,
Which is,
the problem of the driver falling asleep at the wheel.
this is the section on spiritual illiteracy.
Yes. The source brings up a concept called tadabbur, reflection, deep pondering thought.
And the problem is, we don't do it.
The problem is reading the manual without understanding the language. The source argues that reciting the Quran, just making the sounds without understanding the meaning, is an act of self-imposed spiritual illiteracy.
Wow. That's a stinging critique. It's like having the instruction manual for eternal happiness, a guide that tells you how to avoid suffering and find peace, and you just admire the fount.
Or you enjoy the rhythm of the words, the melody of it, but you ignore the actual instructions. The source compares it to holding the source code for life, but treating the characters like abstract art. You hang it on the wall, but you never compile it.
And there's a specific verse cited here, that same one from Surah Muhammad 47.24. Do they not reflect upon the Quran, or are there locks upon their hearts?
That image of the lock is so powerful. The source argues that failing to reflect isn't just a mistake, it's a spiritual defect. It's a blockage. Because how can you follow a legal code if you can't decode it?
You can't. You're just guessing. Or worse, you're just doing what someone else tells you the code says. You're outsourcing your own understanding.
And this connects back to Todd, the oneness of God. The source argues that submitting to the one God implies submitting to the source of knowledge. If you rely on rote memorization, or if you just follow what your local religious leader tells you without checking the text yourself, you are bypassing the direct connection to the source. You are intellectually surrendering to another human being.
So this intellectual engagement isn't extra credit. It's the prerequisite. The whole system, Salat, Psalm, salvation, it all relies on you actually reading and understanding the code for yourself.
Correct. You have to be the programmer of your own soul. You can't outsource this work.
But let's be real for a second. Even the best programmers write bugs. The system crashes, we mess up, we get angry, we get greedy, we hurt people. That is also part of the human condition. What's the debugging process in this framework?
That is tauba, repentance.
Now, usually repentance feels like an emotional thing. You feel guilty, you cry, you say, I'm sorry, it feels very heavy.
And the source acknowledges the emotion, but it argues that emotion isn't enough. A system restore requires more than just feeling bad. It outlines a three-part bug fix.
Okay, walk us through the patch.
Step 1, intellectual recognition. You have to identify the error. You can't just feel a vague sense of badness. You have to know what law you broke. Did I violate someone's rights? Did I lie? You have to see the actual bug in the code.
Okay, identification. Step 2.
Remediation. This is the hard part. You have to actively fix the damage. If you stole money, you return it. If you slandered someone, you have to go and correct the record. You have to balance the ledger.
So you can't just ask God for forgiveness while you still have the stolen cash in your pocket.
Exactly. You can't patch the software while the virus is still running. And step 3 is commitment.
Commitment?
You have to rewrite your internal code to ensure the error doesn't repeat. It's a forward-looking patch. You analyze why you failed, and you build a safeguard against it.
So it's constructive. It's not just about wiping the slate clean. It's about upgrading the system so it doesn't crash the same way twice.
Exactly. It transforms failure into an optimization opportunity. And once you have debugged the system, you want to grow it. You want to invest. This brings us to infaq, or tzedakah, spending in the way of God.
Charity.
But again, viewed through this rational lens, is not just being nice or helping the poor. It's an investment strategy for the self, the kudi.
Kudi, that's a term famously used by the philosopher Iqbal, the selfhood. How does giving away money build the self? It seems counterintuitive.
It's the mechanics of attachment. Material wealth is temporal. It depreciates. It can be lost. The soul, the self, is eternal. When you sacrifice the temporal resource for a higher moral cause like helping the poor or building community, you are asserting that your soul is more important than your bank account.
You're transferring value from a depreciating asset, money, to an appreciating asset, your character.
That's a perfect empiricist way to put it. The ROI, the return on investment, is that it transforms you from a passive entity into a dynamic agent of Rama, of grace.
Yeah.
You become a vehicle for mercy in the world. You aren't just consuming resources anymore. You are generating real value.
So let's pull the camera back. We've looked at the variables, salvation, liberation, enlightenment. We've looked at the daily protocol, salat, psalm. We've looked at the debugging tauba. What is the final picture here? Where does this all lead?
The final picture is the shift from chains to triumph.
It's a narrative arc.
It is. The source synthesizes all of this into the concept of the earned self.
Contrast that with the saved soul. What's the difference?
Well, a saved soul can be passive. It can be waiting to be rescued. It implies a state of helplessness. An earned self is active. The source argues that the Quranic framework is about closing the distance between the human will and divine perfection through wasila self-refinement.
So the individual takes full responsibility.
Full, unmediated responsibility. No intercession without action. No magic. Just the law of recompense. You get exactly what you strive for. Man shall have nothing but what he strives for. That's the core axiom of the entire system.
And that leads to the climax of this whole philosophy, the move to sovereign freedom.
Yes. This is what the deep dive is all about. We started with the sound of chains. Chains of superstition. Chains of the ego. Chains of society telling you who to be.
And the source code, the message brought by Muhammad, is the key to unlocking those chains.
But note how it unlocks them. It doesn't unlock them by letting you do whatever you want. That would just be chaos, another form of slavery to impulse.
Right.
It unlocks them by asking you to voluntarily submit to a higher universal logic.
That's the paradox, isn't it? You submit to become free.
It's the paradox of the vicegerent. The source calls the human the vicegerent of the divine on earth. By aligning yourself with the laws of truth and justice, you are no longer a slave to your appetites. You're no longer a slave to what your boss thinks or what the latest trends are or what your fears are telling you.
You become a force of nature.
You become an active agent of justice. You upgrade from being a user to being an admin.
Huh. An admin. I like that. You possess the agency to shape your reality through ethical action. You're no longer just the effect. You become the cause. So we've gone from the universal desire for salvation, that heartbeat we heard at the beginning, to the realization that it might just be a constructed, rational reality, a system we can actually run ourselves.
And that brings us to the final provocation.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this light concept, this Nur.
Most of us spend our lives waiting for a light to turn on in the dark. We're waiting for a sudden revelation. We were waiting for a feeling to just wash over us.
We're waiting for a savior to knock on the door and say, "Don't worry, I fixed it."
But if the source code is correct, if the Quranic framework is actually a rational operating system,
then the light switch was never on the wall. It wasn't in the sky.
it was wired into us all along.
It was wired into your own capacity to reason. It was wired into your capacity to act. The hardware is there. The software is available.
So the question we have to leave you with today is this. If you possess the source code for your own eternal triumph, if the manual is sitting right there on the shelf, but you treat it like abstract art or just a set of pretty sounds.
Are you the prisoner of your own potential?
Think about that.
Read the manual.
This has been The Deep Dive.
See you next time.